Hey everyone, this is Jen Bucholtz, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Oh yeah, this is going to be exciting. So for anybody watching, we're talking about the Zodiac Killer today. Jen is the one who Jen's been on the show before, by the way, counterintelligence agent, just like
I
me
was.
in school. We actually met in passing and had a conversation, I think in Kuwait, on our way to war zones and stuff. So
I believe so, yes.
we didn't really know each other, but we had enough
Yeah.
commonality that I remembered the conversation. And, we realized that last show. So everybody should go, I'll put it in the show notes, but you guys should check out that show with Jen. What she does now, among other things, is she helps break cold cases. There's one she's working on that's not Zodiac. We're going to get to that towards the end. But today we're talking specifically about Zodiac. And so when Erik came on and we broke the news, and we were the first live interview, with Case Breakers.
That's right. Yeah, it was that day. I remember watching. Yeah.
Right. And so it's hard to anticipate all the questions. And there were a ton of questions. So definitely you guys feel free. I'm going to do my best to filter through, but I'm not going to be as question focused this time. Look, the bona fides for these people is there's decades and decades and decades of detective work. Erik, his analysis team helped find the 9/11 attackers before 9/11. These are people who are highly, highly qualified. Jennifer's got, oh my God, I mean, it's incredible what you all do and then the passion you put into this. So let's understand the bona fides are there. And then, the legitimate questions on what about the DNA and what about going and getting the guns? All of these things have to happen in a certain order. You don't just go to Riverside PD. You don't just go to SFPD and say, we solved the case, because they have actual today murders right now going on, taking up all of their resources. And so you have to build a case to prove that you've broken the case. It doesn't mean you haven't broken the case. It takes time to get enough attention. And so we have to understand that about this whole process. Okay, enough of me yakking about this. Let's talk about an incredible walk. So in the counterintelligence world, we always talk about walk-ins and practice walk-ins, and 99.999% of the time, a walk-in is nothing comes of it. But then a walk-in comes in and something does happen. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and so hey Erik.
Hey, how are you? Sorry, I was looking at it. I went into a different room that Pete had sent out, so I'm sitting there going,
oh, you were sitting there by yourself.
why is nobody? Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, Erik's one of the kids too. He's down below me here. He's he used to be my commander in Bosnia when we were in a counterintelligence company. So we're going to let Erik talk, but let's get back to Jen and that walk-in.
Yeah, so for audience members who aren't really sure what a walk-in is, basically it's a human that quote unquote walks into your office and provides you something that they believe is of intelligence value. And that's a lot of what we did in the military. All three of us was take walk-in sources, take the report, and then follow up on the information and decide whether it was worthy of sending up the chain of command and so on. And so actually this whole Zodiac process for us started with a walk-in, and it wasn't for me. But it was a walk-in that came to a news station that a guy named Dale Julin was working at several years ago, 2014 timeframe out in California. And it was a homeless guy that showed up at this news station and said that he felt the guy who'd been his father figure for most of his life was the Zodiac Killer. And, of course, Dale was incredibly skeptical because this has happened hundreds, if not thousands of times over the last half century since these crimes. But for whatever reason, I think Dale's gut instinct told him, let me at least hear this guy out. And so he did. And, he doesn't call himself an investigative reporter, but I would, especially in this context.
Yeah.
And so this walk-in, gave him this information and eventually gave him the full name of the guy that he thought was Zodiac. And Dale started doing his own research to see if he could confirm or deny these guys' claims, and everything that he found out actually confirmed the claims. And so Dale just kept on down this path over the last 7+ years. And here we are right now. And obviously there's probably much more in this process to come, but we just turned a page in the book and are on a new chapter. But yeah, that's how this whole process got started. And then I'm happy to, discuss more of those details, however many you want me to talk about.
Well, I think we can spend a little bit more time on the walk-in part. This exact report has come out for, my father-in-law, my this-in-law, my, whatever.
Yes.
Right. How do you vet that information to say, okay, I know you're saying we chase down the leads and everything, but what does that really look like? How do we get to the point where, hey, this is worth our time? What does that look like?
Well, and when I say we, I use that term loosely because this didn't even come to me or the case breakers until 2 years ago. So Dale had already been doing research for a good 5 years before he even got a hold of me. So he really deserves the credit on the majority of this. And eventually he will be in a position to tell his entire story, both verbally and through his book manuscript. But the guy who showed up at the news station was actually homeless at the time. And we're just calling him by his middle name, Will, because we're honoring his request for him to stay anonymous. But he was on the run from a man named Gary Francis Poste, who he claimed had been his father figure for a couple decades at least. And backing up from the day he arrived at the news station, several weeks prior, he had confronted Gary Poste about being the Zodiac. And Gary Poste tried to kill him as a result. He swung a hammer at Will's head, fortunately missed, hit him in the shoulder. And then from that day on, Will went into hiding and basically went on the run, left his hometown, left his house, his family, everything, because he was under the impression that Gary had PIs out looking for him, trying to locate him, and that Gary was going to hunt him down and kill him. In fact, when he showed up at the news station and first talked with Dale in those first couple of conversations, he asked for witness protection through the FBI. Obviously, he never got that because the FBI would never take any of this seriously. Hopefully one day they will. So Will, with the help of Dale, stayed in hiding for a long time in various places throughout California. Yeah.
And
so anyway, go ahead.
Will has a gunshot wound. You guys have seen it in his shoulder. It's not like he made this up or anything.
Well, he was hit with a hammer, not a gun. He wasn't shot. He was hit with a hammer. So, I mean, I'd have to ask Dale if he saw bruising or whatnot. I don't know.
And we I'm sorry, we had already also received that he was slowly figuring it out as he was getting older, and Will got more and more interested in true crime and that kind of thing. And he finally, he had conversations with them before asking about it, not outright accusations, and he was getting roundabout indirect admissions to the point where I think the one of the reports that we received from Will is that Gary Poste actually dropped off a book about the Zodiac on his front porch. So it's like, why, this guy is giving me roundabout things. He's then dropping this book that talks about the Zodiac, and that gets to the point where he's coming to grips with the fact that your father figure was probably a serial murderer is psychologically devastating to him. And so, I mean, we had gotten some reports that he was really, really, besides wanting the police protection and the anonymity, he was also suffering psychologically and having all kinds of effects from that we've not even, and I would tell you that we brought in some psychiatrists and psychological professionals on our team to look at it. And they're at the point where this is a new phenomenon that they haven't really named. And so there's a whole nother issue of recognizing that, and it's not post-traumatic stress, but it's more of just the realization that, your foundational base, everything in life's been ripped out from underneath you. And there's again, like I said, this was such a new thing that there's no name for it.
Yeah. And actually on a side note, I saw another example of that at CrimeCon this year when the daughter of the BTK killer gave a presentation, and then she actually wrote an incredible book. It's riveting. I mean, it's really gives you some immense insight into the trauma that she has gone through since the day that she, FBI showed up at her house and told her that her dad was the BTK killer. Mm-hmm. So Erik's right. It is a phenomenon. It's a very small group of people that experience this particular phenomenon, but it exists. And I would absolutely place Will in the same category.
Yeah, and it's kind of like alcoholism. I mean, it not only affects the alcoholic, but it affects family members. It affects friends of family members, and it goes out from there. And so this kind of shock realization is going to hurt more than just the victims and the victims' families. It's going to the family of the perpetrators are also have to suffer through this as well.
It's fair to say that addiction also kind of accompanies these kind of things as you try to cope with what you're experiencing in life and what you're going through.
everybody has their own coping mechanism, and it could be addiction, it could be alcohol, it could be, erratic behavior or isolationism. And I think in Will's case, isolationism was his coping mechanism first and foremost.
Yeah, and probably how he felt safest too.
Yeah.
So when he gives you the name, we also get to the cryptography, and this is a big thing about the Zodiac, is that his cryptographs have been broken. I'm doing quoted fingers because what does that mean exactly? Broken several times, going far back as when he was active. There were breaks in the cryptography, but you guys are claiming that Gary Francis Poste is the key to breaking the code, and without that, you couldn't truly break it. Let's talk about that a little bit, Jen.
Yeah, that's correct. So he actually sent in a couple different types of codes, and I'm learning about cryptology as I go. This is definitely not my area of expertise. So there's at least 3 or 4 ciphers, we'll call them. That's what the media has called them over the years, where he was actually using symbols other than the alphabet, right, to send in a code. And the early ones were broken by citizens of San Francisco. And I think that probably made him mad that they broke it so easily, And so I think he spent some time making more difficult ones. But on top of that, the taunting letters he sent in, this was the brilliance on behalf of Dale and what Dale discovered. All those taunting letters that Zodiac sent to the media and to law enforcement were actually anagrams. And for those that don't know what an anagram is, it's where you have, a message that's in regular, English letters. But you have to take all those letters and basically throw them up in the air and let them fall down and then rearrange them into the actual message that he's trying to convey. And nobody had realized that. Or if they had, they didn't have the cipher key, and the cipher key is his full name. So you have to remove the letters of his full name from each of those taunting messages that he sent in, and then rearrange the rest into the actual message. And that's what Dale did over the course of many, many years. He hasn't cracked all of them, but he's cracked many of them. And if they're decoded properly, there will be no letters, or in some cases, numbers even, left over. And I'm really tired of hearing that, well, I can find the letters of my name in each one of those messages. Yes, you can, but that will not leave you with the correct combination of remaining letters for you to decode his message.
Right.
So, I can't seem to get that message through on social media, but hopefully this will help. Yes, you can find the letters of everybody's name in pretty much every one of those messages. But you're not going to end up with the right result.
Yeah, and there's also an alphanumeric combination one of the things that made it for the code breaker we used for the Cooper case. So one of the ways that he was able to break it is because Cooper, Robert Rackstraw, as a veteran of Vietnam War, a helicopter pilot, and working intel on the side. One of the things that our code breaker learned was the codes that he was using to put hidden messages into his 6 letters that he sent since the jump, which again also were taunts and ego driven, narcissistic driven. Those were broken as easily because it was part of a training, a U.S. Army training manual on code writing and ciphers and code breaking that was used in the schoolhouse. And so our guy who was breaking the codes was also a Vietnam vet. He goes, this is an old book from the 70s. It was, once he figured it out, he goes, this wasn't hard to do. Just, you're pulling out keywords and phrases and alphanumeric combinations, and I mean, it takes time and it's very tedious work, but it was a simple cipher to break. And, he's looking at this almost in the same manner as the Zodiac Killer. Now, the Zodiac Killer made it difficult because you're not just looking at 26 letters of the alphabet, you're throwing in symbols, and each symbol then raises the stakes exponentially, one level. So having a 36 letter alphabet or whatever makes it incredibly harder to figure out. But again, if you have the cipher and you have the key, that clears, that's 80% of the work in terms of understanding that.
Yeah. And that's how Dale was able to deconstruct this whole case backwards, which isn't normally how you investigate a case. But you really did need the cipher key in order to work this case backwards. And that's exactly what Dale did.
Let's just for a second pause, because I really want to reiterate the point that you said. simply entering the words William Van Landingham does not solve these things. When people say that, like
right,
or whatever,
right.
that is not the point here. Is that his name provided the key to unlock all of it. Your name may fit, but it is the wrong key for the lock, so
That's
it
correct.
will not unlock the code.
Right.
How much of the codes were already breaking? Like what percentage of it was broken already, and then how much clarity were you guys able to give? Because there is some breaks, like Herb Cain's name and all that kind of stuff.
I lost my audio. Can you guys hear me or no?
I can hear you now.
There you are.
Can you talk a little bit about the percentage? Yes.
Okay, well,
can you talk a little bit about the percentage of the breaking before? Yeah.
So like I said, the codes that he sent in that used different symbols than just the alphabet, I believe 3 of those were broken, long ago. There's definitely one still out there, which is the 340 cipher. This is causing a lot of controversy too, so I'll clarify this. The 340 cipher was broken last December by 3 brilliant people who developed a computer program that was finally able to crack that code. The original code was 340 symbols. There were a few letters in there, but it was mostly like other symbols, right? So they figured out the pattern of these symbols and all this stuff, and then decoded it into just an alphabetic message. And then everybody was disappointed because it really didn't say much, right? Just like all the taunting letters don't really say much at face value. That 340 cipher is another anagram. It needs to be broken one more time. So you need to take the 340 letters, remove the letters of Gary Francis Poste from it, and then rearrange the rest into his actual message. And I'm willing to bet there will be some pretty critical information in there.
Right. And there's some intentional, once you get the lettering from it, there's some intentional misspells in there. And the misspells are because he had to get the cipher fit in. So he had to change a couple of things. And the reason why we know this is because he did it twice. The same misspelled word twice in 2 different letters. And so it's like, okay, he's pushing in a code that didn't quite fit. So he's had to change the spelling on one of the letters in order to do that.
And I think that one's been revealed, so I'll just say it, but it's the word paradise. He spelled it with a C instead of an S because he needed the C for his middle name.
Right.
But yeah, and then there's another one I think where he says Xmas, meaning like the short for Christmas, but there's 2 S's. It's because he needed a second S for something.
Right.
So yeah, there are some misspellings, but that was deliberate.
And then he was known for misspelling in general, even in his open clear text. Is that linked to the cryptography as well, or is that just him being silly? What do you guys attribute that to?
I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Erik? That's a good question.
The ones that I saw, they looked like just simple misspells. I mean, that were in there. I mean, those themselves. But when you saw something that was a no kidding pattern, like something like paradise, and then the 2 S's on Xmas, that's on. It's like that one's hard to do. And so, and that's part of what Dale did was he was comparing his what he was writing in the letters with his actual writing. And not, if you're not seeing a pattern where he's misspelling everything here and there, it's like, you can get away with like 1 or 2, but not some of the obvious ones that you do multiple times.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I know about encoding messages from our days, and I don't know, did you guys cover this stuff in CI school, Jennifer, or no?
Cryptology, no.
Cryptology is a signal piece, and so when we all went through, it was something called the Bob. Fort Huachuca had a schoolhouse had something called the Big Orange Book, and that when you got the Big Orange Book, it was like you carried Bob around, post, for those different classes.
Right. But I guess I mean, like, there's all these different ways. Like, we learned in my era of counterintelligence school, we learned how to work a one-time pad and a couple of different ways to, like, these tools exist and we didn't master it. We just kind of, oh, okay. Right. But it was hard, tedious. It was easy to make a mistake and never realize it. So your friend would try to break your code and you look and be like, did I make that? So it's easy to make a mistake. And unless you're
Yeah.
Really? So do we account for this at all? Like him just simply making an error, like you said, Eric? He had common mistakes where he needed a C to be an S, but is it possible that there are also some errors in there?
I mean, yeah, there's you can't say that there always is, but when we looked more, you have to then apply it toward the circumstantial evidence of his life, and he was a extremely, as an extremely manipulative person. He was also somebody who was also paid a lot of attention to some of those specific details. So, if they were, I mean, when you're working as a solo operative, let's put it in those terms. You got nobody's there checking your math when you're working lone wolf. But so again, there's always a possibility of mistakes, but for somebody who is that meticulous and even to the point of obsessive with control over his life, putting in spelling errors was going to be something very rare.
And I will say, with regard to the 340 cipher, it appears he did make a mistake, because if you go look at the steps that those guys used through their computer program to solve it.
Yeah.
They solved, I think it was the first 2/3, and then the last third wasn't quite making sense. And they realized that because the code that he did it in a diagonal pattern. Well, one of those diagonals was off by one position in the last third, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
But by then the guys had enough of the rest of the message that they could figure out, oh, that one letter doesn't belong in this word, And so then they figured out and corrected for that mistake. But I mean, he could have done that on purpose, but that was such a difficult cipher to begin with. I tend to think that was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
But, I want to also inform the audience that, he was trained in this for the Air Force. And when he was sent up to Tool Air Force Base in Greenland, he was there. He was a radar man. He stared at a radar screen all day. But part of their job, or their whole mission basically up there, was to protect the distant early warning line, the DEW line, which was the line of military outposts on our behalf that was there to watch and make sure Russia wasn't going to come over the North Pole and try to invade us. Well, back then, they didn't really have computers, so they didn't have an automated way to encrypt the messages that they needed to send from one outpost to another. So they had to do that manually. And so he was doing that. So he was very well trained and practiced in this whole field. Right. So he had a lot of experience to begin with.
In Grace Smith's book, he talks a lot about radians and mapping and patterns with the mapping. Does that stuff follow with what you guys have seen from him, or was Grace Smith wrong about that stuff?
I mean, no, I would agree with that, because in the anagrams that Dale's decoded, there's a lot of military wording or phrases. There's military acronyms and jargon, and he gives a lot of navigational instructions or directions. He uses true north and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, that the mapping and navigation definitely, I think, was something that he was very well versed in.
One of the most confusing ones is the murder of Donna Lass that was in the Lake Tahoe area, who oh, by the way, she had never been recovered. And so his cryptic messages of using the picture of the postcard of look between the pines, that's been a big point of discrepancy of, are we looking between two pine trees, or are we looking through a single tree that has a hole, a knot in it or something like that? And because there's, not only did you have a picture of the area, you had a picture of the trees that were with knotted, you had a skeleton that was pointing to different areas. And then he had some cryptic messages in the margins and the outside. And so he was using, again, it was a way of, besides just doing a taunt, it was a way of putting that message out there. But again, through Dale's work and then through Tom Colbert's work, he was also discovered that, Gary Poste was in the area, actually had known Donna Lass, because apparently she had been dating, or she had dated his Gary Poste brother and broke up with them. And so there was a vindictive, motivation there to take care of his brother, so to speak. But that's, so we have, it's not just breaking codes and then just like, okay, this is the guy. It was, the code breaking and using the name as a cipher. That was the spark that really just said, look, this case is worth looking at. You really can't now you have to get in there and dig through all this other evidence that's brought out through witnesses and interviews, and that's really the gumshoe stuff that Tom did. But the code breaking really just became the spark that said, let's start working this guy backwards and seeing if he lines up geographically with all these areas, if he has a forensic, if he has the motivations, all these pieces that you would then have to put together. And now we're boiling it down to, and you were getting slings and arrows from folks that just like, well, they don't have the DNA, so they're wrong. And they don't have the ballistics, so they're wrong. And, we broke the code a different way, so they're wrong. And that's not how you solve these cases.
And I think it's fair to say that, this link to Donna Lass, okay, maybe that's circumstantial evidence, but good grief. That's a significant thing. Is it as good as DB Cooper's parachute that you guys have? No, but it's damn close.
Yeah. And, the thing is we know from Will and from other members of the posse, the posse and that's known him. He's taken these guys into the woods. He's shown them survival skills. He's showing them how to cache a deer by hanging it in a tree so that the bears don't get it. We think that he may have, honestly, it is a possibility that when he said, look between the pines, it's because he cached her body, 50 years ago up in the trees. And so again, that kept it up there as kind of a trophy that he could see or visit or whatever. But also, once that falls apart, then over the years, then, there's really no discovering the body.
When you guys break these codes and you're starting to read through them and everything, are you getting more information? Are you realizing there's even more coding? He wrote a lot of stuff outside of the codes on the envelopes and everything else. What else is out there information-wise?
Well, one thing is that in one of the anagrams that Dale decoded, and I'm not going to say which one, but Zodiac Poste, he explained that the killing of Paul Stein was personal because Paul Stein had stolen from him, and he called him a cheat and a thief and explained that was why he killed him. And to me, that's pretty glaring evidence to me.
Yeah.
And then to embellish a little bit on the Donna Lass situation, it was the same thing. Dale decoded, many of these anagrams, and at least 3, which have been publicized through the Tahoe Tribune article. So everybody can go look at that and you get a little idea of Post pattern and his MO behind these. But anyways, at least 3 of those anagrams gave information that led to this particular tree in the High Sierras where, like Erik just said, we believe he had hung the bones of Donna Lass in a bear cache. And so just the fact that 3+ anagrams overlap with this same information and give you specific directions to an evidence site, that was a linchpin in Dale's work for me. That was the point in his manuscript where I'm like, this has to be right. Nothing else makes sense except this.
Right. And
everything that he keeps uncovering just falls into place. There's nothing that you have to explain away as you do with other suspects.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's like, I think you had asked this, Pete, earlier. Is just like, what did you take consideration of the other candidates or suspects as Zodiac? And we really didn't have to, because there was already evidence out that either exonerated or disqualified different individuals, including was it Lee Arthur Allen, the guy they named, the guy that everybody thought it was for a long period of time, especially his body size and type was totally different from Poste. When you see some of the younger pictures of Poste, and I just saw somebody had colorized a version of the police sketch. It is a dead reckoning for one of his younger pictures, that we had of him. And it's just like these guys, just the police sketch alone was just, another piece that, again, we never saw a single thing that disqualified him. We kept getting more and more evidence that was building up and pointing to the same guy. And so that's what I mean. It's just like, you really can't, go after this case and say, these guys don't know what they're talking about because this one piece I disagree with. It's the whole, 50 years later, it's the whole of the evidence that you have to then take into account together. And that's where all the other candidates or suspects didn't line up.
Yeah, like we had Arthur. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would venture to say maybe 10% of what we know has been publicized. And so I would urge people to remain objective and patient, because there is so much more out there, and there's still other avenues we are working on to keep confirming or not that Poste was Zodiac. So please understand that it's not just a couple anagrams and some forehead scars that we're going on. We're not gonna stake our reputation and careers just on that. So
right.
Please trust me when I say that there is so much more behind this.
Right. This is one of the things, and I've been trying to lightly engage on the comments. I mean, if people are going to be belligerent, I'm not going to do it. I even started the whole comment thread on a YouTube show, like, yes, everybody be nice and calm, but remain skeptical too. That's okay, because these guys,
we all are.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we're still trying to disprove this, because that's how a good investigation goes. We just haven't been able to disprove it yet.
Right.
So.
And to answer Jason, no last names, question by interviewing Dale. Let's let Dale get his book out and let him earn some money, because this isn't free work,
Yeah, and I would tell you, it's Jennifer brought Dale to me. I brought Dale then to Tom. But the entire process 2 years ago was us having to play devil's advocacy with Dale, and we've had some long conversations like, what about this? What about this? And oh, by the way, you're the way you wrote it. I mean, he wrote his evidence up as almost a narrative manuscript, and it was even story based. It's like, look, this isn't going to fly. This has to be redone. And to Dale's credit, he was at the point where he was exhausted by this himself. And that's he recognized early on of so many other lives of people that had gotten so obsessed and just destroyed their own lives because of this, that he brought it to Jen, and who brought it to us, because he was like, look, I'm kind of done. I'm kind of out of this. I got to move on with my life. It's not healthy for me.
Let's recap real quick, because we do have some people coming in just now. So you had a walk-in to a guy named Dale, who's one of the prime investigators on this. He's got the better part of a manuscript written, and a lot, like, he's chased this thing down, and it has yet to fail him in terms of, this is Gary Francis Poste. He's worked to break some of the cryptography. We found out new things. I want to talk more about Paul Stein in a second here. There's quite a bit of information in this. The Donna Lass stuff. I've not heard any of this Donna Lass information that you guys are talking about. Once we get done looking at the postcard, we're kind of out of ideas, but we're talking about more and more things. So when people are asking for where's the hard evidence, there's a lot of new information here, especially with the breaking of the codes. You guys discovered that there was probably an error in the encoding process. You're able to fix the error and then come out and still make a sensible breaking of the code. If I've got any of this stuff wrong, let me know. But this is what we're talking about. This is what it looks like when you find the Zodiac, is the pieces fit together. This isn't Arthur Lee Allen with fatal flaws like his DNA doesn't match, and maybe he dabbed something. No. This is someone who knew Donna Lass. His brother dated her. Holy crap. I mean, that's an enormous piece of information. And I don't know if he was ever a person of interest in the Donna Lass murder, but it seems like we just don't know anything about that. So that's just a little bit of a breakdown on what we've got. Anything you guys want to correct or add to what I just said?
The only thing is, you said on correcting the mistake in the cipher, that wasn't actually us. That was the 3 guys last year who cracked the 340 cipher. So they discovered that small mistake, and then were able to fix it and reveal the whole message. And for those that just joined us, yes, those guys cracked the 340 cipher, but it needs to be cracked one more time, because it's an anagram with 340 letters that need to be rearranged. So if anybody out there is really good at anagrams, please. I know Dale is just sick of it. And it gives me a headache. I've spent hours on it and gone nowhere, and it gives me a massive headache. So we would appreciate help.
Well, we got more information. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Erik.
Yeah, and the Donna Lass connection is not something that is new that nobody knows. I mean, he sent postcards in of the location and told them this is where this is where the body is. So, but again, it's, the one she was never found. And so, once you cache, if you're going to cache it correctly, you're going to do it right, and you leave it up there for, decades, it's going to fall apart, and it's going to get, or it's going to get dragged, through everywhere from animals and all that stuff. So it's, it's one thing to bury somebody and say, yeah, this is a location, let's dig it. But when it's when it's disposed of the way we thought it was disposed of, it was designed eventually to drop and then to get just torn into by the local animals, and just then you got nothing. That's the thing. It's like you've really got a way to take care of a body that in the wilderness that you really can't do just by burying.
And it's possible that he came back and retrieved that bear cache himself.
That's true too.
And then buried her somewhere else.
Right.
I still have this idea in my head that her body may be in a grave somewhere up there in the high Sierras, and that one of these later anagrams that hasn't been decoded yet might have clues as to where he buried her, if that's what happened.
Right.
I got to be honest, some of my time in the Sierra, rock climbing and stuff like that, a small part of me has my eye on the ground looking for a bone sticking out, because I've climbed and hiked and camped all over that area, and you're sort of, kind of like looking for Bo Bergdahl, right, Jen? Like you go on a patrol and they're like, look out for Bo, and you're like, I don't know where Bo is, I'm looking, but I got an eye out for him.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that situation.
And again, part of it is like when we explained that we had a team that we'd put together to go up into the mountains to recover the pistols. I mean, that was a 12-hour hike with across a trail that had been destroyed. So they were really breaking brush. One of them finally got injured, but it was with a guy in his 50s and two guys in their 70s, and it was just and I saw the comments in some of the videos like, what do you mean you couldn't get up there? That's got to be easy. It's like, have you ever hiked? Yeah. Have you ever done that before, uphill for 12 hours? It was, and oh, by the way, they were carrying not only camping equipment because they had to stay there overnight, so food and survival gear, but they were also carrying metal detector equipment and video equipment and, things like that. And so, we got to the point where, we're talking with some allies within the law enforcement. I won't say which department or jurisdiction, but, they were essentially, it's like, look, if you're going to go up there, there is the chain of custody issue is so important that if you go up there and you find it, bury it again and then come see us, show us photographic evidence and then come see us, and then we'll fly you up there and go pick it up, because we don't want you guys picking it up and bringing it back down and then trying to explain to everybody that, hey, here's where we found this stuff. Your chain of custody becomes really important. So it's almost, again, like we were saying before, if you're going to coordinate with law enforcement, you kind of got to solve the case before they'll come in and say, okay, you guys have solved it, okay, let's solve the case now. So, and I'm actually blessing in disguise. I think that they didn't finish the hike because, as you said, Erik,
nobody would believe us. Like they'd say, oh, you guys planted that,
right? Exactly.
So even if it was on video. So at this point, and this is another thing I get tired of seeing is like, well, why didn't you guys just go retrieve them? Because we shouldn't be, because we're not badged law enforcement and we're not part of the investigating authority.
Right.
We are asking somebody from one of those investigating authorities to accompany us so that they can seize the evidence properly and all that and adhere to the chain of custody. So don't blame us for not doing that.
Right.
This is law enforcement's decision at this point to not assist.
And if you're working cold cases, and this is again what we're trying to do is to foster the interest in the organization of building, cold case teams around the country. You can't really do cold case investigations unless you are partnered up with law enforcement. Again, you have to do it in cooperation with them. You can't, if you're doing these investigations and you're fighting law enforcement as much as you're, trying to get the case solved, you're never going to get it solved. Oh no, by the way, eventually you have to hand something off back to law enforcement. You just don't go to, say, okay, we got this and we're going to embarrass all of you because, nana, you couldn't figure it out. That you'll never get cooperation from law enforcement again. So every step of the way that we've worked worked respectively. I mean, law enforcement to us are heroes. And so it's, that's the kind of reverence that we have to have when we proceed, so if they're telling us, and they're the ones that were telling us that, look, you just can't go up there and pick this up. Got it. No problem. We're done. We will not do that unless we can find, do it in the right way, to pick that piece of information up.
And we are getting police departments more willing to stick their necks out on some of this DNA stuff. These Stanford murderers from the early 70s are, they're getting solved and attached to someone via DNA. This is happening, but you guys are right. It's if you want to be legitimate case breakers, which you guys are, you have to work with the law enforcement people, and then also build up your credentials so that when you show up and you say something, it's not as hard next time. And by the way, you also get to get paid for this. You get to have a movie, you get to have a book, and these things are elements of this. The police, and this, we talked about this in your episode, Jen, just how long it takes for someone to solve these cases. If it takes 10,000 hours, the police department doesn't have that. They don't have 10,000 hours to give to a case.
No.
And so it is up to guys like you.
Not a 50-year-old case at that. You know, I mean, there are 6,000 new cold cases every year. There's like 18,000 of them that are just languishing with victims and families and everything else. And you want us to spend all this time and resources, even from a public safety officer standpoint. It's like, God, the poor. I have so much sympathy for Riverside Police Department and Vallejo Police Department and, Lake Tahoe PD. It's just, oh my God, would this case ever go away? It's one nutcase, or amateur investigator after another. We get claims that we're supposed to, golly, it's got to be to the point where it's like, here's our blank letter. If somebody inquires about Zodiac, cut and paste, here's your reply. It could be an automated messages after a while. It's just like any email you get with Zodiac, this is the algorithm that has the automatic reply of, thank you for your support, now go away. I mean, that's got to be the hardest thing for these, and this is one chief, how many chiefs of police in the Riverside PD have been, it's something like 5 or 6. And it's just like, it's got to be part of their continuity files. Like, oh yeah, here's the Zodiac folder. If anybody contacts you, 99% of them are nuts. So, it's best to be so skeptical that unless these guys have solved the crime, only then do you want to work with them. And by that time you're done.
Yeah, and we can't officially solve this. I mean, all we can do,
right.
I mean, law enforcement has to quote unquote solve it. And by the way, we never made any claim ever that we solved the Zodiac case. That's another headline I've seen over and over. And I'm like, we never said that. And we're not saying that. We never will.
Right.
All we're saying is we have 7 years and thousands of hours put into this. And many, many people with a ton of experience in investigations coming to law enforcement saying, okay, we have compiled all this information. Will you please take a look at it?
Right.
And by the way, you could solve it if you would just do this DNA comparison, which they're refusing to do. Right. And we can't do a DNA comparison. Like, we don't have a DNA lab at the Case Breakers, and it wouldn't be accredited and legal anyways. So, I mean, we're begging law enforcement to do that for us. So please stop criticizing us for not having DNA evidence, because that's not our fault and it's not something that we can legally do.
Right. I mean, for the Cooper case, we delivered like 1,800 pieces of evidence to the FBI, to include pieces of the parachute, to include his DNA, because when they did a cold approach for the History Channel documentary in 2017, he left a water bottle, and so they grabbed the water bottle and sent that with it. I mean, it's just. Those kind of pieces of information, and again, it's as soon as that documentary came out, the Bureau closed the case. And I think part of it is it's just to get rid of the headache of having to deal with this until they can declassify information about what his roles were working for other agencies within the government.
I've got a leaf blower right outside of my tent, so let me just see this part of the conversation. His boots. I know you guys were looking for his boots. Is there any update on his boots?
I don't know anything about obtaining his boots, so I can't speak to that. Yeah,
we have as far as what I'm trying to piece together, because we haven't talked about the boots in a while, even amongst ourselves, is that we had a photographic evidence that he wore them. He was in the job that required them. And I think when we were talking, when we were still working with Will, and he's somewhat disassociated himself with us, and there's an internal issue there that I won't get into, but he actually claimed that he actually may have the boots. So there's it was just one indicator. It was just one piece of evidence that we saw that we put together with that. But again, it's like the watch, was there paint on the watch? Yeah. Did he paint for 40 years? Yeah. He painted or 4 years prior. So there's pieces that, we have identification that this is evidence or this is possible evidence, but just like Jen said, it's, until we can get authorization to touch that stuff, then it sticks out there as a piece of evidence that is, adds to the bigger picture.
And that watch to me is probably one of the most critical pieces of evidence. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, when Sherry Jo Bates was murdered in 1966, the killer lost their watch during the scuffle, and the watch was recovered by Riverside PD at the scene. My understanding is it's still preserved and they still have it, and that some sort of testing was done on it 4 years ago, and that they obtained at least a partial DNA sample from it. I don't know what their DNA results were specifically, but I think it should be maybe tested again with even newer technology than 4 years ago, because when you wear a watch, inevitably sweat in it, you're going to lose arm hairs in it. There could be a minuscule arm hair in there that has DNA. You lose skin cells into the band and, the
Right.
holes in the band, all of that. I mean, it could still, even more than 50 years later, hold valuable DNA evidence. And all we're asking is if they have that DNA profile to please compare it to
Right.
Gary Poste's DNA, and then either rule him in or out as Sherry Jo Bates' killer.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can talk, but it's still loud over here. This is all fantastic stuff. I love that you guys are working on this, and if nobody else says, thank you for doing this. There's been a lot of concern about what about these families, you guys coming off too early, like you shouldn't be saying this without knowing, but you're not saying this without knowing. It's not a lack of evidence. You guys have put pieces in place, and you're through so many of the gates. You are confident in saying, this is our guy. Maybe you're not saying definitively it's solved, but you're saying this bears more looking. We need this DNA. We need this ballistics.
Right.
Have you guys come off too early? Is it possible that you guys are still wrong?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, there's always that possibility, and, we're not 100%. We're just saying everything that we've gathered so far in 7+ years points to this guy. That's it. Like I heard Paul Holes the other day, even though he was slamming our work, he did make mention that in the Golden State Killer case, there was other suspects who had way more circumstantial evidence pointing at them as being the Golden State Killer, serial killer. But in the end, it was the DNA from D'Angelo that matched. And that was the guy. So, I mean, we're very well aware that even though everything we know points at Gary Poste, it could still be wrong. And that's fine, because we're just after answers at this point. We're not getting paid to do this.
Right.
I don't even care about a book or any of that stuff. I much prefer to just stay behind the scenes myself. But we're just after answers, because it doesn't matter how old a case is, the victims and their families and the community that was terrorized, deserves some answers. Yep. So that's the main goal.
And as a guy that grew up in Benicia, that terror lasted well past the Zodiac's active days. It was, we would go out to Lake Road. It was always scary. It was a terrifying place. I wanted to go back into Paul Stine. You want something to say, Erik? Please go ahead.
No, it's funny. That's how terrorism works, because, you've had other killers that have killed many more people. I mean, John Wayne Gacy, for crying out loud, is, gosh, I'm trying to think of the cannibal. But again, but what's that? Yes, Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I mean, and they, these guys have killed many more people, but the terror element is what lasts and persists. I mean, there is still folks from our generation. When you still go into the ocean to swim or whatever, it's since 1970, was it 76, 77, you're thinking about sharks. You're still thinking about sharks. That's in the back of your mind. So when, same thing with the Son of Sam, where women were changing their hairstyles. And so folks, that's the kind of thing that reaches, when a killer like the Zodiac Killer, that reaches right into your home. That's how the terror works, and that's why he becomes so notorious and becomes the holy grail of cold cases, because he still lives in the hearts and minds of many of the folks who still live there.
Yeah, I if I'm getting gas in DC, I still do a lazy W, which by the way for the audience, counter terror or counter sniper technique.
Yep, we all do. Or if you're waiting for the metro, I still do that.
Yeah. Can we get back to Paul Stein? Because again, like Donna laughed, it was just assumed to be these random things, and you guys are now saying, which makes way more sense, these weren't random killings. This was a targeted killing, and then you've got the cryptographic evidence tying it to Paul Stein for a specific reason. Now we have a motive. Let's talk a little bit more about Paul Stein. And then is there a possibility that any DNA survives, or in a cab, is it all just kind of compromised?
Okay, so Paul Stein was one of the later victims of Zodiac. I think he was, well, it depends who you ask. I mean, our opinion, I think he was about number 7. But he was a cab driver in San Francisco, and he was, shot through the head one night from a passenger in the back seat. Zodiac took claim for this murder and proved it by clipping a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt before leaving the scene. And then he mailed in a letter 2 days later with that piece of bloody shirt so that police, so I guess they could prove that he was the one that killed him. And I think the reason he did that is because Paul Stein didn't really match his previous MO. And so he probably knew police were going to be skeptical if he claimed that killing and didn't have any proof. So I think that's why he took the extra risk to, take the piece of the shirt. And that actually brings up a separate point about, we can get into Sherry Jo Bates if you want, because there's a lot of, controversy or whatever about if he killed her or not. But I don't believe Zodiac or Poste, I should say, would take credit for a murder that he did not commit. So I'll just put that out there. Yeah. In fact, there was a couple letters he sent in clarifying that he had not committed a crime. One was like a bomb at a police station, I think, in San Francisco. And in his letter, he said, just so you know, I'm not the one that did that. So to me, that's part of his personality that's showing through, that he doesn't want to be credited with something he did not do, but he definitely wants to be credited with what he did do. But anyway, so yeah, in the decoded letter or anagram that Dale decoded, it states that Paul had stolen from Poste in the past, and that he specifically sought him out, as retribution. So. I think Zodiac has been connected officially to Paul Stein's murder by law enforcement. Yeah. But that's just another piece of the puzzle that falls in place with Poste being Zodiac.
And again, you have really two different MOs for target selection. You have, Donna Lass, Paul Stein, Sherry Jo Bates. These are individuals that were probably targeted because of who they were, or circumstances. There's other circumstances that tied them together with Gary Poste. But when the other ones, the suspected murder of, there's a couple down by the shoreline, the couple at the lake, and the couple at the those at the, I don't want to call it the makeout point or whatever, but the couple that was parked. Those looked more like he had been cruising those areas and knew that there were, that there was frequency and vulnerable areas that he could then stalk those areas to look for the right timing and the right choice. And so you don't have to have a personal connection to those. Your connection is you just walked into a place that I feel is a killing area. And you're ripe for this kill to do that, just as if you were hunting or stalking a deer or a wild animal, which obviously he had demonstrated himself. So those were kind of like your two MOs that it seemed to have come out, and that's why you see this discrepancy. It's like, well, these were different murders because they were conducted in a different way, and they all don't have to be in the exact same way, as long as he's got the capability and the motivation of doing it, and having two different methods, then so be it. It works for him.
Yeah, and just because somebody uses a different technique or something from one crime to the next doesn't mean it's not the same criminal. Right. Criminals' MO evolves over time. They get better at what they do. They learn lessons of what works and doesn't work. So, like, for example, look at the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. If Poste killed her, that was a very chaotic and not well-controlled murder scene.
No.
It was very messy. I guarantee the killer got a lot of blood on them. They lost their watch. They left all kinds of forensic evidence, and they just didn't control the scene well. They may have not have used a knife before and didn't realize how difficult it would be to kill somebody with a knife. Anyways, fast forward to the next crimes. Now he's having some standoff distance and using a gun, which eliminates him leaving forensic evidence. And it's a better method of killing. It's less messy. It's much more efficient. So that could be evidence of his MO evolving over time. But one theory that I put out there, and I can't prove this at this time, but he may have written some of these taunting anagrams ahead of time as a challenge to himself, and then went out to find the right victim or victims of opportunity that would match up with the letter that he wrote. I believe he was huge into personal challenges, and that may have been one way that he upped the ante for himself.
Right. And even the evolution between Sherry Joe Bates and then the couple that he stabbed at the lake. I mean, he had, used the gun to the point where he could then get them in essentially an execution pose, both of them tied each other up and lying face down before he started to stab them. So he had them in the, he had disciplined the environment to get it to the exact position where they were completely vulnerable and he was completely in control. And then he could do a close-up killing with each of them. I know the male survived, but he could do that because he had set the stage and had learned his lessons to create a setting that was not going to be chaotic whatsoever. He was in control the entire time.
Yes.
And just for the record, I am not disappointed in either one of you. I think you guys are doing incredible work, and all the case breakers are, and for all the families that hopefully we're going to get some relief. Thank you for that. Everybody else can have their opinion, but here we are talking for an hour about stuff that no one's ever talked about in these cases because you guys have figured out new elements of it. So thank you for doing that. There's questions about Hartnell and Magoo, the guys that survived the attacks at Berryessa and at Blue Rock Springs and Vallejo. These guys, I think, have said over time, like, I'm done talking about it. I've moved on. It's been 50 years. Yeah. And then would you trust any witness ID? Is that even credible anymore? Would you guys even? No. I mean, you guys are trying to do this right. Would you guys accept an ID from these guys?
I would be incredibly skeptical, and this is because it goes back to the Cooper case. That one of the flight attendants looked at our guy Robert Rackstraw and said, "Hey, you know what? I don't know. I don't recognize him as the guy, 50 years later, or I think 45 years later when she was finally confronted." But again, she didn't recognize the guys from photos a few weeks afterwards. So it wasn't like that her mind deteriorated over time. It's just the trauma of the event has changed whatever happened in her mind. The picture of that has changed to the point where unless you've captured that early on, even a few weeks is going to erase that and cloud your memory with your emotional memory of what happened, not the actual eyewitness piece. So you really can't. God Lord, that's what I'm saying. Is like after 50 years, I'd be skeptical of anything.
I don't trust eyewitness.
And what about
testimony or information too much anyways, especially like the sketches? Oh my gosh. I mean, the sketch thing is like at the bottom of our list of circumstantial evidence. It is. Please. Right. I mean, sketches, I know that there's some brilliant sketch artists out there, but that doesn't mean the eyewitness is recalling correctly what the person looked like. True. So I put almost no stock in any kind of sketch.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like when you see like and this is not a knock on anybody, but when you see the Zodiac sketch with the glasses and the glasses are all like dervy, it's like, oh, come on.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
How is that going to be I know it's evidence, but how is it going to be like, you can't even draw glasses correctly. How do I know you got the jawline?
I mean, you're looking at distinctive features. So it's like you're seeing, look, I got the guy's height, weight. I got his general look. Some very, the scars are some just a distinguishing key that you look at, but really what you're doing with the sketch is you're doing it to eliminate other people. So when, Arthur Lee Allen, when he's, this guy looked nothing like him, wasn't even close, height, weight, everything else. So that's a disqualifier for there. But for Poste, it's not like it pegged him and said, this is the guy and the scar is exact. And if we're wrong, it's because this, the circle around the scar or whatever it is, it's more of, again, it confirms that you cannot disqualify him because there is similarities there. There's several similarities with him, the facial shape and everything, but you can't then peg it and say we got our guy. We can put that sketch on a driver's license and it'll pass for him. That's not how it works.
And in each case that he was identified by a witness, Blue Rock Springs is completely black at night. Even if there's a light there, he's going to be backlit. The girls on Cherry Street in San Francisco identifying him for Paul Stein's murder, they are nowhere near his face. I mean, these are compromised things that we're trying to. Do you guys put the Kathleen Johns abduction down as a Zodiac victim as Gray Smith does, or do you guys disagree with that or have no opinion yet?
It was actually that came up between me and Dale yesterday on the phone, and that's actually not one I've looked at closely. So I need to do some more research before I can even talk intelligently about that crime. So
and again, that one is almost completely based upon witness evidence. There's next to nothing for forensics that then you can go back. It's purely based on witness evidence, which again is so old. It's circumstantial.
And I would never want to say this didn't happen to Kathleen Johns, but if she did fake that, it would not be the first time someone did that to get attention for some reason. And that's a possibility of greater than zero. I don't know if there's specific evidence that definitively.
I'm sure she did run into somebody. We just don't know if it was him.
Right. Fair enough. There was a question on any audio. Has any audio come up with him that you guys can use in some way in terms of evidence?
I don't know of any, Eric. Do you?
No, and if I'm sure I'm sure there's audio evidence, whether it's a video recording or something like that. But then, what do you compare that to?
Yeah.
Again, you have to compare it to witness testimony from 50 years ago. That's even worse than visual. So it's
and your voice changes. I mean, there could be audio like from when he appeared in court, after his arrest a few years ago. But again, he's like 50 years older than he was when he was committing 40 something. Right. Your voice changes, so it's not going to be a match. I don't think that would be very useful.
No.
Syncretic takeout is syncretic. Great word, by the way. Can you talk about partial omission of "she's in the tree" statement and a physical tree from the Tahoe Daily Tribune article? Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it, Eric?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so again, everybody go Google Tahoe Tribune and Zodiac, and you'll find the recent article by Bill. And he got some exclusive rights to certain information, directly from Dale. They've had a dialogue going for several years now. And Bill was actually, very instrumental in helping Dale either confirm or deny some of his findings. Anyways, so the "she in the tree" is a phrase that Poste supposedly said at one point when he was up in the Lake Tahoe area for a wedding. And he stated that to Will, who told Dale about it. And it stuck with him because it's such an odd statement. It's like rhymey, and it's almost like a line out of a poem or something.
Prophetic.
Like that. So he just it just stuck with him because it was strange. But it matches up again with the other information that Dale got from the decoded anagrams that were pointing him to this particular, Zephyr Cove up in Lake Tahoe. And you go certain directions from there and so many feet, and then you find this very peculiar looking tree. And sure enough, 40 feet up, they went and got a 40-foot painter's ladder, which is the same size Poste would have had, and climbed up to the 40-foot mark, which is where Poste said evidence would be. And sure enough, there's a bunch of wiring and glass insulator and like a pulley system. This is in theory where Donna Lass's body was hung in a bear cache. Obviously, that wasn't there, as we already discussed. But it's just the "she in the tree" comment fell in line with the other information that came out of those decoded anagrams.
That's and then Chad talks about you guys slowing down and getting some evidence. You guys are 40 feet up in a tree with a pulley system and wire that's clearly designed to hold something up there. And bodies don't stand up for more than, listen, it's food, and it's going to go.
I mean, Chad, we're trying to get evidence. If you would write a letter to the Riverside PD so they could, confirm or deny, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and to the credit of all these different PDs, they are trying to take this stuff seriously, but there's only so much time. And look at Vallejo PD. They just said a lady who was kidnapped, abducted, raped over and over again. They just lied on TV that she lied, right? And so their desire to get something that wrong publicly again has got to be zero, because Vallejo PD has enough bad press. They don't need to go out, willy-nilly on something like this. Yeah. I asked Erik last show, what is your hardest piece of evidence that you would say is out there that you've seen, Jen, where you're like, this is like, there's no way this can be anything else but Gary Poste, but based upon this evidence?
I'm sticking with the cipher.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key to the cipher. I mean, that to me, again, and that was our start. That was what I call the spark that says, this is our key guy. Now let's work this backwards. If that didn't make sense, or if that was just like, we never would have even started the case if it wasn't for that piece that Dale had brought to us and said, this is what I have. And again, it wasn't that he just figured it out that's what the cipher was. He was given that to him by will. So again, it's the same, it's the same thing as all the other pieces that we had then found. I mean, we're at the point now where there's not a lot more that we can do without the cooperation of law enforcement or folks that have the ability to look at the hard pieces, that either recover the pistols or the DNA. But that was the hardest piece, because that was the start.
Did Will ever think that Zodiac was going to try to actually kill kids on a bus, or was that just him taunting and dreaming and hoping to get something done?
There was a whole nother message in there. No, he wasn't going to kill kids on a bus. So those were just words with the letters that he needed to use to, obviously at face value, he still wanted to scare the public and terrorize the public and taunt police. Right. Okay. But no, I mean, once you decode that message, there's nothing in there about killing kids.
Can you tell us what is in there?
I cannot at this time. I'm sworn to secrecy because that is Dale's story to tell, not mine. And by the way, Dale is not doing interviews right now. So I know tons. I mean, everybody's asking me, like, can we bring you and Dale on and all this stuff? And unfortunately, right now, he's not doing any interviews. And that's, for several different reasons.
Well,
but it will all come out. Yes.
All right. Anything to add in closing for either of you?
I just appreciate you having us on and letting us tell some of this background. And hopefully, we're not trying to change people's mind necessarily, but I hope it'll bring a little clarity to why why we ended up bringing this information to the public.
Right. And Pete, again, thanks for having us on. I mean, I know you're going to get a lot of views. I know you're going to get a lot of comments, but again, we remain skeptical as a team. It's we're not standing on some hilltop just screaming, "This is the guy! This is the guy! This is the guy!" We've never done a case like that. It's one of those things where why do we do this? Because it's there, just like anybody else that was interested in this. So again, the vision going forward is to motivate all the folks that have the ability, whether you're an amateur investigator or whatever, is to organize yourself so that you can start collaborating and working with other people. There's so many other crimes that are more recent, more, quite frankly, more important, and have and have more victims that are all suffering because of this. That's really the intent of this, is not to tout our name or anything like that. That's not important to us.
By the way, I see the handwriting question real quick. Yes, we have handwriting from Poste. The problem is Poste was ambidextrous. He wrote his letters with both hands. He wrote them upside down. So the handwriting samples we have don't eliminate him, but they also can't 100% confirm that he's the same person that wrote the letters.
Right.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm ambidextrous, and not like I can do some things. I can write both-handed. And if I was going to try to deceive somebody, and I can write with pencil in one hand, and I can go across and shift hands as I go. So you don't even know which hand I'm using when I'm doing it if I want to.
Right.
And, and so if I was to be in the getting away with stuff business, I would absolutely use that to my advantage. I can color and draw with both hands at the same time.
Well,
that's amazing.
Guys
Yeah.
in military intel, if you're Navy, you got to be able to write backwards on the other side of a plexiglass, in an ops center on ship.
That's right.
When I was working tactical intel, I had to learn how to write upside down because I was on the opposite end of the top of the table working the threat forces while the commander had to do that. So you're writing things. You have to learn those things in intel or in different jobs that you're working. So it's not a big deal to be able to learn how to write in a different manner.
Yeah, for sure. And it definitely makes it hard to figure out what the hell I'm thinking or doing. I appreciate you guys doing this. I just want to take the last moment of the show just to let everybody know my brother passed away last Thursday, a week ago today. On the bottom of the screen, you see scrolling across our GoFundMe to support him. He's a great dude. He was tough as hell, and we lost him. He's only 46, leaves behind 3 kids. So if you guys are so inclined to help and you want to do something besides condolences and prayers, we would appreciate a little bit of financial help. Go to the GoFundMe. You just type in Eric J. Turner GoFundMe and you'll find it, or go to my social media accounts and you'll find it. It's not a light ask because I know a lot of people want to help, and I want to give you something to do. And this is the area where I can't control that. I can take care of my brother's family and get them the resources they need otherwise, but the money will go a long way. We'll do more on my brother soon, and we miss him like crazy, but if you want to help, that's the best way to do it. And, I'm going to go ahead and shut this thing down. You guys stand by. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching the Break